A little before 5 p.m. ET, a literal raging fireball was seen falling from the sky before finally crash landing in the woods near the small town of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. Eyewitnesses said they felt vibrations all over their body and environment as the object was descending, and suddenly they heard a loud thump around the time of the crash. The witnesses would have been called liars or crazy, only that the fireball object was seen by other eyewitnesses in 8 different states in America and even as far as Canada. But here is where things start getting dicey. Before anyone could take a proper look at this object, the military intervened and cordoned off the area. It's been more than 50 years since, and we still don't know what happened at Kecksburg that fateful night. At 4:43 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on December 9, 1965, a fireball sped across the darkening sky over northern North America, leaving a trail of smoke behind. Sightings were reported in Ontario, Canada, and at least 8 states in the United States, ranging from Michigan to New York. Police departments in the affected cities were getting thousands of calls. People were calling in, thinking it was a plane crash. The very next day, newspapers reported that it was a UFO ship that crashed and started a fire in Ohio and Pennsylvania. They also reported that the object had crashed in the woods just outside the little Pennsylvania town of Kecksburg. Keep this in mind because this will be important later. And unlike other UFO cases I've covered on this channel with little to no proof, this case was filled to the brim with proof and multiple witnesses' accounts from different walks of life. The newspaper agencies and witnesses not only saw the fireball when it was descending, but they also saw it when it crashed at the Kalp Farm. The Kalp Farm is less than 1 mile from Kecksburg Village, and this was where the object appeared to have crashed, half a mile from the Kalp's house. Initially, not everyone knew exactly where the object crash landed. Even the police didn't know, and some people were checking other suspected areas. Francis Kalp made a call that they were able to pinpoint the exact location. When people finally arrived at the crash scene, they discovered that the object was an odd, bell-shaped craft with no wings or identifiable propulsion system. The strange thing was, the bronze-colored object didn't look like your typical UFO ship or saucer that is ring-like. Instead, this UFO object looked like an acorn and was estimated to be around 15 feet long and roughly the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, and it was glowing with a sort of purplish-blue color. The lights were very bright, then the flashes the light made seemed to be timed. It looked random at first, but on further inspection, they came to the conclusion that it wasn't. Adding to the strangeness, the UFO object had a design carved along the outside of the ship that looked like Egyptian hieroglyphs. It's definitely not Egyptian or of this world, but at least that's what the marks looked like. By now, the radio stations, the TV stations, the newspapers, and the police department were all jammed with reports of the sighting. People who had seen or heard about it were calling to talk about it, and the media was reporting the case as it happened. Within hours, military officers arrived at the UFO crash site to seize the wreckage. According to local newspapers, the area surrounding the crash was promptly cordoned off by orders from the United States Army and Pennsylvania State Police. In fact, according to a story in the Tribune Review, police officials ordered the area roped off to await the expected arrival of both U.S. Army engineers and possibly civilian scientists. In less than 4 hours of their arrival, the military officials loaded the bell-shaped craft onto their trucks, covered everything with tarps, and hauled away the last remnants of the crash, and that was the last of it. Despite the glaring proof witnessed by hundreds of people, the government came out to claim that what crashed was a meteor or space debris from a foreign satellite re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Basically, something normal. You see, naturally, the government has long kept track of not only US space activity, but also launches from other countries. I mean, this was during the Cold War. If the Soviet Union farted, the United States government wanted to know everything about it and vice versa. So they basically took the shoot first, ask questions later approach. And by shoot, I mean taking whatever crashed at Kecksburg. So they came with the notion that 1. An enemy or foreign object fell. And because it was foreign, they had the right to be there to take the wreckage and tear it apart for intel. Some even speculated that the object was the re-entry of the Cosmos 96, a Soviet Venus spacecraft that was supposed to reach and explore the planet of Venus, but failed to even leave Earth's orbit. It was expected to re-enter Earth's atmosphere that same day. However, this hypothesis was challenged because of discrepancies in the date and trajectory of the Cosmos 96 debris. It turns out that Cosmos 96 wasn't even near the US at that exact moment. Plus, if it was a secret self-propelled object in 1965, where was the rocket exhaust? There was no way the Cosmos 96, which failed by the way, could travel through the atmosphere with that speed over 6 states without burning up in the atmosphere. So basically, this was a weak theory from the critics or logical section. After this poorly thought up excuse was challenged, this was when NASA investigated and decided that the object was most likely a meteorite. However, their documents from the incident were reported missing, adding to the mystery. And there is even a belief that these documents weren't missing, but instead, it was never recorded to begin with, to avoid being traced. I mean, there were no loggings of any form in regards to space debris on that day and time of observation. So even if I wanted to act on logic and facts alone and believe that it is a meteorite or space debris according to credible government sources or something mundane and explainable, the records proving that, even if it was a lie, weren't created at all. The total absence of clear evidence and the deletion of official records only exasperated the mystery and theories surrounding the Kecksburg UFO. And to be frank, some of these theories make more sense than what the government would have you believe. Several theories have emerged over the years to explain what might have caused the crash in Kecksburg. Some suspect it was a covert military experiment or parts of a crashed plane, while of course most people think it's a UFO. But the truth is that we don't really know. Is that there was a heavy official and military presence in the woodlands that night, and that the area was fenced off. And here is where things get weirder. Even that night, no one knows what particular body of the military was involved. There was no visible form of insignia to say these military units belonged to the Navy or the Air Force. Even the Pennsylvania State Troopers were thrown off the site and kept in the dark. However, it was later revealed that the US Air Force was the most likely candidate. But this small piece of information wasn't revealed because they like you. It was revealed to keep people from digging too much. Because naturally, one of the US Air Force missions is to retrieve space satellite debris. This was especially important for any fallen Soviet satellites, which may provide crucial intelligence. If the Army had been aware of reports of items falling from the sky, there is a considerable probability that they would have looked into the situation as it falls under their jurisdiction, which was what is believed to have happened. However, multiple witnesses reported that the authorities, or whoever was in charge, introduced themselves as NASA employees and not military personnel. This revelation gave rise to more confusion. So, which was it? Air Force or NASA? Not only that, but the report that came afterward from the military said nothing was recovered from that site. Like, how did something that made a huge sound when it crashed disappear, and then you say nothing at all was found? It would have been much better if they stuck with the meteor story than saying nothing at all was found. But why all this secrecy and lies in the first place if it was just a meteor or Russian satellite? This is why the majority of people believe it was an extraterrestrial craft, citing the behavior of the military and whoever was in charge, the odd hieroglyphics on the body of the object, and the acorn shape of the object as evidence. In such, days after the crash, many eyewitnesses reported that they were being forcibly sent away by military forces, and some claimed to have been contacted after the event by men in black, who threatened them not to mention what they witnessed that night. For those who don't know, men in black are said to be government agents dressed in black suits that question, interrogate, harass, threaten, reportedly memory wipe, or even assassinate witnesses to UFO encounters in order to keep them silent about what they saw. They were prevalent in the 60s, and I'm pretty sure they still exist as you are watching this video. I mean, the case of Edward Snowden, a government contractor who leaked highly classified information from the NSA about the NSA spying on all Americans, shows how far the government will go to hide its secrets. In some extreme cases, one would find themselves wishing for death. Aside from the men in black, the media also changed their story. Remember at the beginning of the video how the media reported the news heavily that it was a UFO and all sorts of things? That same week, they did a complete 360 turn and also said nothing was found and that it was also a meteor. It was now evident to everyone that a cover-up was in play. With all these secrets and lies, it became harder to find the truth. But luckily, there was one man who dedicated his life to finding out what happened that night. And after 59 years, we finally got an answer: the truth. Stan Gordon, a UFO researcher of 10 years and an expert on this particular topic, believes the government knows what happened. He's been on this case since he first heard of it as a teenager. Even when the world forgot, Stan remembered and followed it up, especially seeing that after 59 years, the government still continues to refuse to provide any concrete information about what happened. Stan Gordon interviewed dozens of Kecksburg eyewitnesses and has examined several theories, trying to be as neutral as possible.
These people, most of them don't even know each other, but what they don't know is so many of these people gave me those little details of what they experienced that night in 1965.
He even investigated the claim of the object being a meteor, but what he found out during his investigation was that the object was coming down from the tip of Ontario and appeared to have made about a 25-degree turn to the east near Cleveland, Ohio. Then the object made a turn towards the south, and then made another turn towards the village of Kecksburg, where it was going towards the northeast before crashing. Within several miles of the crash site, multiple witnesses reported that this object was coming in at a very slow speed of descent before crash landing. This meant that the military report was, once again, all lies. Meteors or space debris, or Cosmos 96, do not make controlled turns, they do not descend at a slow speed, and they certainly do not glide, which this strange object did. Through the Freedom of Information Act, Stan Gordon requested the Air Force to release whatever information they had on Kecksburg. After a while, he received the official Air Force record of the Kecksburg event. According to the report, federal authorities were also quite interested in determining what the object was. There were memos and demands for information from the Houston Space Center, NORAD, the Air Force Command Post, the Pentagon, and even the chairman of the Office of Emergency Planning, all requesting information. In such, according to a memo for the record from the Project Blue Book case file for the Kecksburg incident dated December 10, 1965, a Major Howard from the Pentagon contacted the Air Force to request details that could be given to the press about the fireball sightings. According to the memo, a Major Quintanilla told him that a team of men were sent out from the Oakdale radar site in Oakdale, Pennsylvania, who helped with the search near Kecksburg until 2 o'clock and were unsuccessful in finding the object. The memo adds that detections of the object had been visual, but it was not picked up by radar, and that the team of men who were sent out to pick up the object worked along with the State Highway Patrol in trying to recover the object. Quintanilla advised the Pentagon to call it a meteor that entered the atmosphere, though adding that the investigation was still ongoing, and that there was no space debris which entered the atmosphere on December 9, 1965. With that plan set in motion, the official Air Force interpretation was that the object was a meteor and that nothing was discovered. Of course, no one agreed with this lie. It's one thing to say it was a meteor or space debris, but to say nothing was found at the site is just a poorly constructed lie. What the military didn't know was that many eyewitnesses reported seeing the military convoy with a flatbed truck emerge from the gully with a massive covered object on the truck. At 2 a.m., they thought everyone would be asleep, which on a normal day most people would be. But this was no normal day, and not everyone was asleep. John Hayes was only 10 years old when a flatbed truck with a massive covered object on the back roared past his bedroom window, and that vivid memory stuck with him all his life. In such, sleuths from the community were able to do a little digging and discovered that the military forces involved that night was an Air Force radar squadron stationed in Pittsburgh. Gordon believes this military unit was part of a top-secret unit with a top-secret mission to investigate UFOs, and there is a reason why he believes this. Remember how I said NASA couldn't find documents that recorded events of that night? Well, aside from the missing documents from NASA, the December log of all actions from the military unit active that night contains no entry for December 9, 1965, basically saying the unit was never in the area that day, or worse, doesn't exist. That indicates that someone or some people wished to keep all information about the unit's engagement in that place private. Basically, a massive cover-up. It was like Roswell all over again. The lies, the threats, the weak theories and stories put up by critics, all playing out again in Kecksburg. The lies or excuses from NASA about the missing documents were not good enough for some people, and one of them was Leslie Kean. Leslie Kean took it upon herself to get to the bottom of it and sued NASA under the Freedom of Information Act for the lost NASA papers. NASA countersued to throw the case out, but luckily they didn't win and were required by law and a judge to release the information. Kean herself is no small person. She was the journalist who blew the whistle on a top-secret government program called the AATIP, or Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which was all about studying unidentified flying objects or unexplained aerial phenomena. So, while the government would come to your face and call you crazy for your UFO talk, they would go behind you and investigate your claim with all seriousness. Even more serious than zealots and UFO researchers. Following a court order, NASA consented on October 26, 2007 to search for those records. During the hearing, a NASA's public liaison officer stated that 2 boxes of files from the Kecksburg event as they reported in 2005 and years prior, and there was nothing more they could do. And with that, the case came to an end. I mean, how do you conduct an investigation when there is nothing to investigate in the first place? Something I am sure the powers that may be did on purpose to avoid cases like this. Loss of records is not a unique case for NASA. For example, the original tapes recorded during the televised Apollo 11 moon landing were misplaced or reused. But some people think NASA is indeed telling the truth, and that they really had nothing on the Kecksburg incident, because to begin with, they were not there. Once again, remember the civilians in charge who claimed to work for NASA? Well, they didn't. That's one thing everyone agrees on. Probably Air Force personnel who identified themselves as NASA personnel. And apparently, this was a very common practice among military personnel in civilians' clothes during the 1960s. So, while people thought it was NASA, in reality, it was a section of a covert unit from the US Air Force. But either way, there was a major cover-up in play.
A cover-up.
So early the next morning, I went to the local newsstand to see if there was any other stories about what was seen last night in the local papers, and there it was in all the local papers. The Pittsburgh Press, the Post-Gazette, the Greensburg Tribune Review had 2 editions, and the early morning edition had Army ropes off area, unidentified flying object falls near Kecksburg. And it went on to say that apparently something had fallen down into the ravine, that the area was cordoned off on the orders of the U.S. Army and the state police, that no one is being allowed anywhere near the object, and that they are awaiting the arrival of civilian scientists and Army engineers to examine whatever it was. So it was pretty fascinating. The later edition of the paper had several different stories, including one that caught my attention, which said, searchers failed to find object. And it went on to say that, yes, there was a search at early morning hours, but they found absolutely nothing, and that the official explanation was that it was people's imagination. They had seen a bright meteor in the sky, but nothing had fallen to the ground. And that's officially where the case remains today.
Even the media that was supposed to report the truth started to change the stories to make it look like it was something normal that crashed. But people knew it wasn't. But if the media was already compromised, then nowhere was safe. And people gradually stopped talking about it to avoid the wrath of the government. The crazy thing is that the witnesses and researchers like Gordon were the lucky ones, others not so much. One disturbing case that comes to mind is that of John Murphy, and his refusal to play by the government rules cost him the ultimate price, his life. A particularly frightening incident of the Kecksburg mystery and how far your government will go is the case of John Murphy. John Murphy was a reporter for local radio station WHJB and was one of the first to arrive on the scene and claimed to have taken photos of the object. As a reporter, the first thing that came to mind was to tell the people the truth, or at least report the facts and data as he saw it, with his credible sources and proof of images as well as subsequent progress of the area. But before he could do any of that, he was barred from covering the military activities on site, and all subsequent effort became harder to cover. He couldn't even take interviews. All these convinced Murphy that a cover-up was taking place. Determined to probe the matter further, he started a radio program called Object in the Woods, in which he explained what he observed that day and his following attempts to investigate the crash. However, before the segment aired, government authorities allegedly visited Murphy's residence and confiscated all the photographs he took of the UFO object. There was no way they would let Murphy tell the whole truth with proof. That would not only cause panic, but it would also mean the government lied about everything, which would hurt more than finding out about aliens, because back then, people really did believe in their government and whatever they said, unlike now where we question every word from their mouth. But they allowed Murphy to release his documentary, but with a catch. Sources familiar with the original documentary, including Murphy's wife, stated that the subsequently aired version of Object in the Woods had been heavily edited to the point that it didn't even mention the mysterious object at all. So, a watered-down version of the truth. 4 years later, Murphy was weirdly killed in a hit-and-run accident while on vacation in California. Usually when I tell a story, I tell the story from both angles of believers and critics. But in this story, the critic theory is so far-fetched and nonsensical. From the hypotheses of a meteor, satellite, and space debris, to missile testing and plane crashes, every logical theory the critic has ever brought up has been shot down by logical counter-arguments. Critics can't say it was hysteria or mass delusion or confirmation bias, because 1, what they described was not your typical UFO ship that was round. In such, this was the first time a UFO ship was described as an acorn. 2, if it was a mass delusion, why was the army there? When researching this story, one thing that stuck with me was how fast the cleanup was. Everyone knew what to do. I mean, as soon as the UFO object crashed, in mere hours of the same day, the military was on the ground, they quarantined the area, the people in charge were in civilian clothes so that no one could easily identify them, they lied saying they worked for NASA, and just as quickly as they came, in less than 5 hours, they cleaned up everything and left. Even if I was a skeptic and didn't believe in UFOs, you have to admit what they did there was pretty shady. You only behave like that when you have something to hide. And then there is the connection of the event with Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book was the code name for the systematic study of unidentified flying objects by the United States Air Force from March 1952 to its termination on December 17, 1969. So, do you see how everything just fits like a puzzle? that whatever crashed in Kecksburg was certainly an unidentified flying object? Every argument critics bring up to make their point just falls short. And as much as they want to deny it, they have to admit that once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. Now, if after watching this video you still don't believe in UFOs, or worse, you still believe whatever excuse the government provides, then I urge you to watch this second video, because this video was about a UFO encounter in a government base. The Rendlesham UFO event is one even the government can't easily cover up, and I'm pretty certain you would end up a believer by the end of the video.